So this morning I was all set for my talk, and we're in this series on Ruth, and I'll explain it a little bit. And to set it up, I was going to play this song, and then they told me I can't play it because then we'll get shut off on the feed.
You're welcome, broadcast. We didn't want you to lose a message this morning.
So anyway, so I said, all right, so I need you to sing it. Go. Let's go. Here we go. Come on. Come on. Let's see what you got.
I don't remember the words. Trying to hold back this feeling for so long. Yeah. Come on, help me out this morning. And if you feel like I feel, baby, hey, come on. Ah, come on. Woo! All right, that's all we're going to do. All right.
So for those of you who are new, what we do in our services is that we take part of our services, we read the Bible and we talk about this truth and how it can help us make our lives better. And so we're in the middle of this series of talks on the book of Ruth in the Old Testament, and it centers on this idea of faithfulness. And we talked the first week about how Ruth basically was faithful to her mother-in-law, and then the second week was Boaz was faithful to Ruth. And today, the reason it's PJ-13 is we're going to talk about sexual faithfulness and what that means. So this passage that we're looking at, I'm going to read it, and you're used to reading it and understanding it from the perspective of a Sunday school version. So we'll read the Sunday school version, and don't everybody get all apprehensive. I'm not getting into the details. And then we'll do the real version, okay? Sunday school version first, stripped down version second. So here we go. One day, Naomi, her mother-in-law said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, my daughter, and the setup is, for those of you who haven't been here, Naomi and her husband moved out of the country. She had two sons that got married. Both her husband and her two sons died. When they're in this foreign country, her two daughter-in-laws she sent away. But one of her daughter-in-laws, Ruth, said, no, I'm going to stick with you. Move back with Naomi. This girl's name is Ruth. Move back to Naomi, back to Israel. And so now they're both destitute, and Naomi has to figure out how she's going to support Ruth, this young gal. So here we go. Naomi said to her, my daughter, I must find a home for you where you'll be well provided for. Now Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. So we are going to get you all together. Wash and perfume yourself and put on your best clothes, then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you're there until he has finished eating and drinking. And when he lies down, note the place that he is lying, and then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. I will do whatever you say, Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile, and Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. And in the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman laying at his feet. Who are you, he asked. I'm your servant Ruth, she said. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a family guardian. The Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. The kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after basically the hotter and the younger men, who rich or poor, you've come to me, right? And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. All the people of my town know that you're a woman of noble character, and although it's true that I'm a family guardian, and there's this weird custom that if there was a family member that was closer, they had first dibs. And this is some ancient Semitic culture. That's just the way it worked. So he had first dibs. So basically, Boaz is saying, I need to make sure there's not another guy that wants you. Bring me the shawl you're wearing, hold it out. And when she did so, he poured 6 measures of barley and put it in there, sent her back to town. And then Ruth came to her mother-in-law, and Naomi asked, how did it go? Are we getting married? She told him everything that Boaz had done for her and added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley and said, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. And then Naomi said, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, because you got the guy hooked. For the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. Is that how you met your wife? Weird custom, right? Now, let's talk about the unsanitized, unvarnished version of this story. But in order to do that, I want to ask you a personal question, okay? And the personal question is this. What's the worst romance decision you've ever made? Okay? The worst. Now, if you're sitting next to it, don't point to the person, all right? But I want you to think about it. When you were dating, sex, marriage, old, young, doesn't matter. What's the worst romance decision you've ever made? Keep that in the back of your mind as we jump into the passage again. Let's look into the non-Sunday school version. So one day Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, my daughter, I got to find a home for you where you'll be well provided for. Boaz is going to be at the threshing floor. Now, what is a threshing floor? The threshing floor was a place, can you show me the picture? This is basically a large circle of stone, and basically you would take all the wheat, all the grain, and you would throw it here. And what you had to do is you had to separate the wheat from the chaff. And it was a lot of work. So basically you would spend the whole year, you'd be growing this, and then you would go and you would cut it down, and you would go and transport it over to this big massive circle. And then the next thing that you would do is you would take cattle, and then the cattle basically would trample all over it. Over and over and over and over again. And then what you would do is you would take these large forks and you would follow them and you would throw it into the air, and then the wind would separate the wheat from the chaff, and you would throw, the chaff would be blown away. So Jesus talks about this imagery of separating the wheat from the chaff. And so this is happening, and this threshing floor area, let me ask you this. If you wanted to go somewhere and you wanted to have sex, I'm not talking about with a prostitute, where would you go and what would you do? How are you going to find someone to hook up? Where are you going to go? You're going to go to a bar? Come on, don't look at me like you go to a bar, right? Something like that, maybe even something a little more salacious. The threshing floor was the ancient version of a bar where you would go and hook up. It was like the slutty nudie bar. And because what would happen is men would be at the threshing floor because you could not wait. You couldn't wait, and you couldn't, rats would eat it and that sort of thing. So you had to, as soon as you cut this, you had to get it out. So they would be there all day long, from dawn until late at night, and they had to stay there and sleep and then get up. And you would do this over and over and over again for a few weeks. And it was this terrible, back-breaking work. And then one of the ways that nod, wink, wink, farmers would get men to do the work is they would allow at night for Mardi Gras to happen. At night, prostitutes would come to the winnowing floor. And at the winnowing floor, this is where a lot of bad things would happen. Now, not everybody did this, but it was just assumed that if you're going to get guys to come and you're going to get them to work all day and all night, you're just going to have to let them do what they're going to do, and that's what they did. So the Bible uses this metaphor of the threshing floor all of the time. So like in Hosea 9:1, it says, Do not reject Israel. Do not be jubilant like the other nations, for you have been unfaithful to your God. You love the wages of a prostitute at every threshing floor. So what does Naomi tell Ruth to do? Wash and perfume yourself and put on your best clothes. In the ancient Near East, there's virtually, in this area, no water. Very, very little water. You didn't take a bath on a regular basis. And so the only time that you would take a bath would be one of two occasions. Number one, you're getting married. And so you would wash yourself from head to toe and you would perfume yourself. Remember that story where a woman comes and pours this perfume on Jesus' feet? And his disciples were like, what are you doing, man? That could have been sold. And Jesus is like, no, don't do it. That was a very nice thing she's doing. This perfume, you would dab it on yourself and it would keep you from stinking, essentially. Do me a favor and lean over to the person next to you and give them a big whiff. See if they smell. Can you do that? Can you do that? Just lean over. Don't worry, if you're new here, we do this all the time. We smell each other in church. So if you're smelling them and they smell good, it's because they're either getting married or, something's going to happen, right? That's what happened in the ancient Near East. Not today. People bathe and put oil on them and that perfume, that sort of thing on a regular basis. Not here. So it was a signal. She knew exactly what she was being asked to do. Wash and perfume yourself, put on your best clothes, then go down to the threshing floor and do not let him know you're there until he has finished eating and drinking. Why? Until he's thrown back 7 or 8 beers, right? Don't let him know you're there until he's drunk. When he lies down, note the place where he's lying, and then go and uncover his feet. And Ruth says, all right, I'll do it. Boaz, when he had finished eating and drinking, was in good spirits, went to lie down. In the middle of the night, he noticed that a woman was at his feet. The sanitized version is she just laid there, cuddled up next to him, and they snuggled. There's a very high probability that that is not at all what is being said. So there are a couple things I want you to notice in the Hebrew. The first thing is the Hebrew word to lie down is the same Hebrew word to have sexual relations with. So you read in the Old Testament, and then he laid down with her, right? It's a euphemism. It's rather than saying they had sex, they lay down together. And so that's the word that's used here. And then second, the word feet or legs is a euphemism for male body parts. That it's just classier to say feet than it would be for the other stuff. I remember I was playing baseball. We were in high school, and there were a bunch of scouts there, and it was a good hitter. So I threw, it wasn't anything like today where everybody in high school's throwing in their 90s and stuff like that. If it was a good windy day, I'm throwing in my 90s. So I choke this guy. So basically I need to make sure that he doesn't connect on the ball. So I throw him high inside fastball. So he turns it around, and basically he hits a line drive to second base. He was a right-handed hitter. And those of you who have played baseball, you know that occasionally a ball, when you go down to get it, guys, it might take a funny bounce. And when it does, it's not a fun moment for you. This happened in this game. My friend Tom reaches down and he screams at the top of his lungs, and then he says the word as loud as he could, and he's rolling on the ground. My coach screams out, say your leg, grab your leg, say your leg, right? And in other words, there are all of these college scouts here, and parents and grandparents and kids. Don't say that. That's so unbecoming to say that. There's a better word. There's a euphemism. Eu meant good in Greek, and themo was the word to speak. And so a euphemism is to say something better, essentially. So So legs or feet, it's better than saying the word, right? So let me give you some examples. Exodus 4:25. There is this really weird marriage ritual where it says, Zipporah took the knife, cut off her son's foreskin, and touched Moses' feet with it. And surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me, she said. Now, if you haven't been married here at CCV yet, you know we do that. And can you imagine how weird that would be? Oh my gosh. And so you cut the foreskin off and then you went and touched Moses' feet. You know, that's what's being said here, right? And then Isaiah 7:20, God uses the Assyrians as a form of judgment. And he said the Assyrians are going to be like a razor. And it says, in that day, the Lord will use a razor hired from the Euphrates River, the king of Assyria, to shave your head and the hair of your legs. In other words, this is a really, really close shave. What God is saying is, I'm not going to kill you, but it's going to come so uncomfortably close to you. It's going to be like you're shaved on your legs. Okay, are we uncomfortable enough? Are we okay? Good. Speaking of females, Exodus 16:25. At every street corner you built your lofty shrines and degraded your beauty, spreading your legs with increasing promiscuity to anyone who passed by. And again, we're not talking about legs. And so what Ruth is doing is what any other prostitute would do. They would bathe, they would put on perfume, they go at night when it's dark, after they had been drinking, and they go to the threshing floor. So Boaz wakes up, and he's like, who are you? I can't even see it. I'm your servant Ruth. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a family guardian. And that's where we have the Barry White song. So it could be, honestly, that he just spread the garment over, but it's not. That's not what's being communicated here. There's more to that. So, see, the reason church people have a problem with that is primarily because she's a female. We want Ruth, like we read Abraham is sleeping with this other person. But Abraham can still be the father of our faith in the Old Testament, and we look to Abraham, we're like, he's fine, right? You can do that with Moses, he goes and kills someone. David has adultery, but Ruth, come on now. Come on. And the reality is what you have to understand, she's a Moabite. And so here's the thing. Either something happened or the thing that didn't happen was just as bad. So a couple weeks ago, Jack Serra was here, Palestinian pastor and the president of Bethlehem Bible College, and it was just a real privilege to be with him and to hear him speak. So I took him after church to my favorite restaurant in the entire area, Aroma Mediterranean down in King of Prussia. And so while we're there, we're sitting there, and a huge family of Muslims come in. The women are all covered with burqas and that sort of thing. And so he's speaking Arabic to the men, but when the women came by with the children, he turned and put his head down. Jack Serra did. And I knew exactly what he was doing. And I said, you were just being respectful. He said, yeah, that you don't. So because in a Muslim culture, or in the ancient Near East during this time when this happened, a woman was property. And that's essentially what the burqa is communicating, right? I am the property of someone else. I'm not going to allow myself to be displayed to someone else and that sort of thing. To show up at the threshing floor to do that was so utterly slutty. It's the same. It doesn't matter if they did it or not. It is just so unbelievably unbecoming that she did that. And what we have to understand is there's a bigger story at play here. I asked you the question, what's the worst romance decision that you've ever made? Dating, marriage, whatever it is. And what we have to understand is that there's a lesson that's being spoken to us today, and it's very, very important. So the Lord bless you, verse 10, it says, the kindness is greater than what you have showed earlier. You're not run after the younger men. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. I will do for you all that you ask. There's a phrase that I actually want you to take a picture of it, or I want you to write it down, and it's this phrase right here. So Boaz says, listen, you came here. It is so unbelievably inappropriate that you did this, but I'm going to get up tomorrow morning and I'm going to find out if there's some other guy in line, and if not, I'm going to marry you because of this moment right here. And the principle that we learn is this. Sometimes you make the right decisions, and sometimes you make decisions right. Right? It's true. Sometimes, as disciples of Jesus, you go and you make the right decision. And then sometimes you make decisions right. So this chapter is about sexual faithfulness. So let's talk about how this applies to us right now. And so 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18 says, flee from sexual immorality. In other words, run from it. Don't engage from it, run from it. And the reason is that the reason God gives the command of fleeing sexual immorality is it's to protect us from something and to provide us with something. God's commands always protect us and provide us, okay? So I want you to listen to me here, not just those of you who that have kids, but those of you who, like everybody in the room, you've made the right decision or you need to make a decision right, okay? So there are 3 areas I'd like to talk about. And the first is premarital sex, okay? So what I want you to envision is there is a woman and a man, and they're going to go to the shore and they're going to go swimming. What's the woman going to wear? Let's just say a bikini, right? She has a top on and a bottom. And let's say the guy, please tell me you're not going to wear a Speedo at the beach, okay? Please, please. So, but just imagine his shorts, right? Sexual immorality is do not, before you're married, touch what is under the clothing. Don't touch it. Don't go there. Don't engage. Don't go there. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is when it comes to premarital sex, before you get married, if you engage in premarital sex, it will have serious long-term consequences for your future marriage. Now, you might think that is absolutely absurd because everybody in our culture is having sex. And I'm telling you that God is very clear. Flee from sexual immorality. So this is some tape, some gaff tape, they call it here on our tech team. And this is what they go, and then they're taping down wires so we're not tripping on them and stuff like that. So we just have a fantastic tech team that, okay, let me do it again. Okay. So put this here, have to be very, very careful because it's super sticky. The Bible says that when we get married, we are to be virgins. And that just seems like so ridiculously stupid in our culture until you realize why God says this. So when you get married and you haven't been with someone, it is like 2 pieces of tape coming together. So when you're married, your bond together, I'm a pretty strong guy. I can bench 500 easily. This is tough to get apart, right? There's a bond there. And the reason God says flee from sexual immorality, flee from premarital sex is, don't you want that? Don't you want that kind of a relationship? Like this explains why so many people have marital problems, and then go on and their relationships will blow up because that bond isn't there. So what, for the vast majority of people in our culture, it looks like this. So I went and got some old red clay from the back of the church here, right? And then what we do is I'll sleep with this person, and then I'll sleep with this person, and that person, and then she'll go and sleep with this person, and then there's oral here, and all this kind of stuff. And then you put it together, and like, it won't even stay together. Like it won't even, now I have dirt mat. Do you see the illustration there? And so, God invented sex. Like he created us. He gets it. And he wants it to be amazing. But when you choose before marriage to engage with that, it weakens the bond. Now, let's be honest. Lisa and I will be out to lunch. Here's what I love about our church. Because we're a church that is made up of converts, of people who everybody's done this. And so we'll be out at lunch. And then like they'll ask, well, how did you and Lisa meet? And I'm like, well, we met in fifth grade church camp, blah, 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 and that sort of thing. And then I'll say, well, how did you meet? And then they'll say, well. And then eventually, we were at a bar, we turned around and had sex, and we got married 2 years ago, and we have a 6-year-old, right? And I'm like, I love this story. I love this story. I love the story not because of what happened. I love this story because you feel so comfortable here that sometimes you make the right decision and sometimes you make the decision right. And for those of you right now that are engaged in premarital sex, for those of you who have parents and you have kids that are in your teen years, you need to understand this. You have to have honest and open and clear communication. Because if you do not, it is assumed that is what's going to happen. So if you have had and engaged in premarital sex, ask for Christ for forgiveness. Don't shame yourself anymore. Move on, and I'm now going to be different. I'm not going to just hop in bed then again with that next guy. The second year in college, I'm going to turn around and become a whore. I'm going to become this complete ass where I'm going to start sleeping with every woman that I can find. You're going to say, I'm going to honor God with my body. I'm going to flee with sexual immorality, and I am going to save myself for my future partner. Second, let's talk about living together. 70 to 75% of people that go on to get married live together now before they get married. When it comes to living together, the problem with living together is you are creating a marriage life with the appearance of a connection without the actual connection. You'll have a life together, but you'll have 2 checkbooks. You'll have a life together, but the reason we're not married is because if I need to bail, I need to bail. Right? Like we're committed, but we're not committed enough to be together. So what happens, like the old story of people going out to the West in the 1800s, choose your rut carefully because you're going to be in it for a long time. If you truly are interested in having a loving relationship that goes the distance, the worst possible thing you could do is move in with someone. Clearly, the worst possible thing you could do. You don't want to test the waters out, pull back, test the waters out, pull back. Oh, this is a good one, I'm in. There are way better ways of determining whether or not you're a fit than blowing up your future relationship. And so I just want to say, for those of you who are living together, I get it. This is what our culture is telling you to do. You're normal in our culture if you're doing that. But sometimes you make the right decisions, and sometimes you make decisions right. So I want to say to those of you who are living together, get married. Get married in the next 6 months. Make the commitment. Get married. And if you're not willing to do that, cut it off right now. Because if you're not willing to get married in 6 months, you're not willing to get married at all. Finally, if we haven't become uncomfortable enough, let's talk about pornography, shall we? The majority of Christian men today, sadly, will watch pornography. No different than non-Christians. About 10 to 15% of women. I can go on what the Bible says about that. I want you to listen to what non-Christians are telling you now about watching pornography. About how your brain is being rewired and how it is actually destroying your relationships. Don't listen to God. Listen to the Joe Rogan podcast. And so, let's talk about pornography. Very simply is an aid towards the thing. And what you have to address is the drive towards that is coming from some unhealed pain in your life. It could be the relationship, but all you have to do is you take the majority of men and 10 to 15% of women, and you give them technology in secrecy. And that's what's going to happen. And so, I had a counselor, my guy, that I've sent people to over and over and over and over again through the years here at CCV. Finally, I went to him this year, and I'm sitting down talking about life and career and that kind of stuff. And he said to me, he said, man, thanks for the business. He said, you've sent so many sex addicts to me over the years. And I said, yeah, we're proud of that. Yeah, we're proud of that. But the thing is, I am kind of proud of that. Not in the sense that, but in the sense that there are just a lot of Christian men who are like, you know what, I want to be done with this. I just want to be done with this. And they're going and they're sitting down with a really sharp guy and saying, hey, I think that there's a better way to honor my body and honor other people. I just really would like to be done with this. And I want to encourage you to do the same. Just to say, you know what, I'm better than this. And can you imagine looking at pornography and doing that like on the stage in front of your wife, your daughter, your son? You're better than that. And so what I love about the book of Ruth, it is so relevant to today. Sometimes you make the right decisions. But you know what? Dang it, as disciples of Jesus, sometimes you make decisions right. Let's do that. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this community. Thank you so much that we are a place of grace and acceptance, but we're also a place of truth. We come to you as new disciples, readily admitting we are broken by the world, by our own decisions, and we need you to remake us into something new. Take this pain that we carry and turn it into something beautiful for you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks for watching today's message. Make sure to check out Brian's new book, Finding Favor, God's Blessings Beyond Health, Wealth, and Happiness. To sign up for Brian's newsletter, please go to Brian's website at brianjones.com.